Awesome. So perfect. Let me know if you guys can see that for anyone that can't see the screen, and I'll make it bigger if needed as well. So I'm just gonna make this boom. Okay, make this a little bit bigger. Cool. Can anyone not see the screen there? I might have to like go back and forth so I can see the chat box, but can everyone see the screen? Give me a thumbs up. No thumbs up. Gonna move this over. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can see the screen, even though no one's giving me a thumbs up. So let's get into it here. Oh, there we go, Tommy. Perfect. Cool, Mel. There we go. Um, awesome, awesome. Okay, 1 second, guys. It's kind of hard to manage when. Boom. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So this is the live training today, guys. Let me just make sure I can see everyone tuning in here. Where is the? Give me 1 second here. Participants, perfect. Just so I can make sure we're not missing anyone here. Okay, so this, whoops, let me minimize this. Whoops, all over the place. Give me 1 second here, guys. Minimize this, and then get the participants here and the chat box here. Perfect. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna keep it like this. Boom, chat box here. Okay, let's do this finally. So welcome to today's live training. So this training is all going to be about hypertrophy 101. So literally everything that you need to know when it comes to the working out and the training side of your fitness goals. Okay, so in this training, I'm going to try to keep it under half an hour, my best, but I might go a little bit over because I want to like get every single aspect of the working out side when it comes to your fitness goals. Okay. So before we get into it, guys, I'm going to be giving away an extra $100 gift card this week. So I'm going to make this a thing like for all of our live trainings. I'm just going to give away randomly a $100 gift card. And the person that's going to win this gift card is like literally at random. So there's only 7 of you guys on right now. So the odds are pretty high. All you have to do literally is just screenshot at any time throughout this live stream, right? Post to your Instagram story with the hashtag MeisterBody and obviously tag myself so I can see it. And then you'll get one of you 7 right now, or anyone that's tuning in afterwards, will get entered into a bonus entry for this week's weekly challenge, which will be announced on Sunday. Okay, so one of you guys is gonna win a randomly. I'm going to give away $100 gift card to anyone that screenshots at this live stream, post on their Instagram story with the hashtag MeisterBody, and then I'll be obviously tag myself so I can see it, and then I'll be picking one of you guys that does that. Okay. We got one more entrance here. Perfect. Cool. And then one more thing I want to address. Anytime that you have a question, between every single like one of these numbers, I'm gonna look at the chat box to make sure there's no questions. But if you guys have a question, or if I'm going too fast, or if something doesn't make sense, drop it below in the chat box. I'm gonna check the chat box between every single one of these mini topics. Okay, and so I can really make sure everything's crystal clear. Without further ado, guys, let's hop into it. Okay. So today, again, it's going to be a hypertrophy 101 masterclass. Okay. So I'm going to be going over all of these topics, kind of mini topics under the umbrella of hypertrophy. And if you don't know, hypertrophy is just basically a fancy name for building muscle. Okay. First thing is going to be about the difference between hypertrophy versus strength training versus fat loss training. Right. Then we're going to talk about expectations, like whether you're beginner, whether you're advanced, like how much muscle you can actually build, genetics, right, versus optimizing what you're doing, training frequency, right? If you're a beginner, advanced, kind of what the differences are there. Training volume, obviously, like how much should you be working out and how much per session. Then we're going to be talking about a little bit more advanced topics like eccentric versus concentric portions of the movement. This is a little bit more advanced, but I think it's very, very important. Exercise selection, obviously. Many of you guys are already in a program, so this should already be pretty optimized for you. How to actually build muscle, right? Like I think a lot of people just think going to the gym will automatically yield building muscle, which is not the case because obviously everyone plateaus eventually. So I want to make sure that we go over what are the actual fundamental pillars you need to apply to your training to actually start building some muscle if you are someone that's plateaued, right? Then obviously avoiding injury. As you get older, this is very, very important, right? Building muscle and losing body fat at the same time. Is it possible? And when is it optimal, right? Rest days, how many? Workout motivation, mindset. I know there's a big struggle here. I think the number one thing I see is people just struggling with motivation when it comes to actually working out. And then we're gonna go over some common training myths, and then Q&A at the end. Okay, so it's a big itinerary. It's going to cover, I think, everything when it comes to the umbrella of training, but I want to make sure this is like super, super valuable at training. You get a lot of value out of this training today, guys, and obviously you have reference to this down the line because this will be available as a replay afterwards. Okay, so let me just make sure this is actually being recorded. So Zoom, give me 2 seconds here, guys. Where is Zoom? Zoom meeting. Perfect. Okay. So let's start off with hypertrophy versus strength versus fat loss. First, is there any questions so far? None so far. Awesome. Okay. So strength versus hypertrophy versus fat loss. What is the difference? Okay. Many people think that these are like very basically the same thing. Like if you go to the gym, you're trying to build muscle, you automatically by default also train for strength. Although there's a very high correlation amongst these three, the more advanced you get, the more tailored you're gonna have to make your training and to actually get the best results possible for whatever your goals are, right? Not everybody wants to build as much muscle as possible. Not everyone wants to get like freakishly strong, right? And those kind of taper off into individual kind of forks, the more advanced you get. Okay, obviously, if you're a beginner, like these are extremely overlapping. There's definitely a high correlation amongst these three. But again, once you get into more like intermediate and advanced level of being a trainee, then these become more specialized. Okay, so with hypertrophy, again, that's building muscle versus strength versus fat loss. Okay. So these two obviously are very highly correlated, but the more advanced you get, the more you're gonna have to tailor training to whatever you kind of want to focus on more. Okay, when it comes to hypertrophy, universally, like the best kind of volume or the best rep range to aim for is like 6 to 12. Okay, 1 to 5 is typically like strength focused, so things like 3x5s or 5x5s or 1 rep maxes, those are typically more focused on strength. And that's kind of what you see in the powerlifting community. Hypertrophy is like typically anywhere between 6 and 12, and then 15 plus for rep ranges is more so focused on muscle endurance. Okay. Strength, as I just mentioned, that's typically on your compound movements. So things that require more than one body part at a time are going to be things like 3x5s, 5x5s, 1 rep maxes, stuff like that. Okay. Fat loss, when you are training for fat loss, believe it or not, you don't really change much. So I think one of the big misconceptions, I'm going to come back down here to the myths, is thinking right here that high rep low weight equals toning. I think a lot of women think this as well, which is absolutely not the case. And here's why. Because once you start going super high rep and super low weight, the muscle that you do have, you're not giving it any reason to stay, let alone to build more, right? And so it's actually quite easy to lose muscle mass once you go super lightweight. You're not giving your muscles enough stimulus to actually stay when you are losing body fat, okay? Because when you are losing weight, again, the philosophy we have at MeisterBody is we want as much of that weight to be fat and as little of it to be muscle. We want to minimize muscle loss and maximize fat loss, okay? But as I was saying, with fat loss, the correlation with hypertrophy training is very high. So you don't really change much when it comes to training. When you switch over from hypertrophy, let's say you're doing a mini bulk or lean bulk, whatever, to fat loss, you don't actually change that much. So I would never ever advise anyone to do high rep low weights because I think it's going to tone them. I promise you, this has to be one of the biggest myths, especially amongst women, that I've ever seen. Okay, so please do not do that. Okay, so hopefully that answered that there. I'm going to see the chat here quickly. Any questions that we have so far? Awesome. Okay, no, nothing so far. Next, we have expectations. Okay, how much muscle can you naturally build? Right. Let's start off with beginner versus advanced. So typically, this is why I advise getting a personal trainer or some sort of optimized program like right off the bat, because you can make most of your hypertrophy gains in the first 3 to 4 years. If you're really good, like 2 to 4 years, like that's kind of the range. So you really obviously want to milk that, right? You want to get someone, or at least get someone to help you that knows what they're doing, that's knowledgeable and educated in the space, because then you can milk a lot of that time when your body is the most receptive to the stimulus that you're placing on it in the gym to break down the muscle and obviously build, rebuild, and kind of grow from there. So as a beginner, as a man, we'll start with the women, or start with the men. It is possible to gain up to, I've seen 20 pounds of muscle in the first year, right? And you usually see this with like young men, like teenagers or like 20-year-olds. They just started working out in high school for whatever or whatever, and they like blow up in the first year, right? So this is definitely possible because the stimulus is so new to that individual. And if they're doing things right, if they have proper form, they're eating right, they're eating a calorie surplus or having enough protein, then absolutely, depending on genetics, you can build a lot of muscle in the first year. So typically, again, that's why it's so important. You want to do things right off the bat, ideally in an optimized state, because you can get the most gains in your lifetime in the first year of training. Okay. Then it's like the diminishing law of returns. The more you train every year from then, the less return you're going to get, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't the case because I've been training for 12 years now and I see very minimal results. But I would say after like, yeah, the first 3 years for sure, then it really starts to taper, right? Every year you get less and less and less because it's harder for you to apply the stimulus to your body in order to grow more muscle from there, because obviously you've already been applying that stimulus for many years prior to that. Okay, so that is definitely kind of the arc, right? The law of diminishing returns. The more advanced you get, the less results you're going to get over time. Okay. And then the last thing I want to touch on here in this mini topic is genetics versus like training optimization. So I don't think people realize like how big of a difference genetics can actually make, but that's not to say that's an excuse for you to blame your genetics for your bad results, right? Because there's a thing called epigenetics, right? Which you have control over, which basically goes off of your lifestyle, your diet, your many variables to then influence the expression of your genes, right? So a lot of these things you can change through diet, through sleep, through training, through lifestyle, through stress management. And these are called epigenetics. Okay, so it's not entirely 100% untouchable, right? With your genetic lottery. Again, when you optimize those things, then you will improve many of those epigenetics over time, which will make it a lot easier to then build more muscle. Okay. With training optimization, I think I don't need to say too much about this because it's, I think, quite obvious. Obviously, and we're going to touch on the exact variables in a sec here, down here. But this makes, I would say, as big of a difference to your results as genetics does. Okay. You guys have probably all seen people in the gym doing some wild shit, especially on, I'm sure you guys have all seen those Instagram reels. Tommy, I'm talking to you, with just crazy stuff in the gym. Okay. So with training optimization, obviously this can fast track your results massively just with proper form, time under tension, isolating the working muscle, right? This will exponentially increase your results. Okay, so these are both massively important. Genetics is to some degree controllable via epigenetics, and training optimization is fully controllable just by you undergoing a proper workout regimen, working with someone that's knowledgeable, educated in that space. It doesn't have to be me, for example, just someone that is. That's why I always recommend personal trainers. Or programs of that sort, coaching of that sort to beginners, because they can make the most drastic results out of it. Okay, so questions time. Did I miss anything there? No questions so far. Awesome, awesome. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next topic. The next thing is training frequency. Okay, let me just boom. Training frequency. So if you're a beginner, you don't need as much. You don't need to work out as much as you think you do. I think this is very prevalent, very common what I see in like the New Year's resolutioners, right? They go to the gym every day in January, and then they obviously inevitably burn out. Okay, so as a beginner, you'd be shocked. You don't need that much. You don't need to go to the gym that much to make gains, right? Because it's such a new stimulus to your body. I would say if you're brand new, you've never stepped foot in the gym, or you have less than like 6 months of experience in the gym, just going 2 to 3 times a week, you'll see significant results from that, right? Anything more than that is just too much, and it'll take your body much longer to recover from that volume and stimulus without any huge gains and benefits, right? So if you're brand new to the gym, again, I'd recommend 2 to 3 full body workouts per week. Then once you start seeing the results of progress slow down a little bit, then go 3, 4, 5, right? The absolute max I would ever recommend like is 6, but that's like extreme. That's like hyper advanced, right? Because I think I made this mistake when I was growing up and when I started training as well. I went to the gym every day because I thought more was better, right? This is absolutely not the case. I now see and value rest or recovery days massively because that is truly where you actually grow, right? Build new muscle. Is in their off days, is in the sleep, is in the recovery process. Okay. So for me, my goal, Rob, again, I've been training for over 10 years now, is even for someone that's been training for over 10 years now, I'll go 3 on, 1 off. I like force myself to take that 4th day off. So let's say go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday for sure. Even if I want to go, I will take the rest day off. Okay. Here's why. Because when you go, let's say your Sunday's rest day, you go fresh to the gym on Monday, you feel good, amazing pump, you're super motivated. Tuesday, yeah, pretty good as well. Wednesday, no, that's okay, decent session. Thursday, like the more you go in a row, the less the higher the less the quality of the session will be. Right. So if I go 4 or even 5 days in a row, then for sure that 4th and 5th won't be nearly as intense. The motivation won't be nearly as high. The pump won't be nearly as good as Monday and Tuesday session will. Okay. So that's kind of my philosophy on frequency. I think you don't need to go as much as you do. It's better to have really good sessions as opposed to getting like going every day with moderate or like shitty sessions. Okay. I'd rather have you in the gym for a full hour, all in, focused, put your phone on, do not disturb, and give that workout your max effort 3, 4 times a week, as opposed to going 6 times a week where you're like checking your phone, you're taking huge breaks, you're distracted, there's no mind muscle connection, there's no pump, So I promise you the latter is significantly less beneficial to just going more intense and having less sessions. Okay. Next, let's talk about best workout splits. So everyone in this call, I believe, is in the program already. So you should already have a pretty optimized workout split. But I think from what I've tried basically every split as that you can think of, bro splits, push pull legs, full body, upper lower, literally everything. And I think it does vary depending on how advanced you are, but I think let's say if you're only going 2 to 3 times a week, I would say any split that allows you to do each muscle group twice per week is the best. Okay, that's kind of shown in the scientific literature to be the optimal, like the top of the bell curve when it comes to maximizing hypertrophy. Okay. I would only suggest more than that if it's like a weak body part that you really want to develop, let's say your arms, your shoulder, whatever it is, then you can do that 3 times a week. But then something else, you have at the expense of something else. Because you can't hit everything more than basically twice a week. So with that in mind, I would say if you're working out 2 to 3 times a week, full body, right? If you're doing 4, I'd say upper, lower, upper, lower. If you're doing 5, then a push-pull leg variation. Same with 6. Okay. And then just kind of modifying that according to whatever your weak points are. Okay. Hopefully that made sense. Any questions on any of that so far? We got a couple questions come in. 1 second. All right. Mel asks, if I'm weight loss program, do I still build muscle? So Mel, give me some context. So as I mentioned here, if you are actually, now I'm going to save your question to right here, build muscle and lose fat at the same time. So I'm going to bookmark that and come back to this in a bit. Okay. Gawain, hopefully I pronounced your name right there. I consider myself to be an intermediate. Do I go 3 consecutive days or rest in between? I work out 3 times a week. If you work out 3 times a week, I would say you could easily split it up. I would say you have more flexibility, and I would also consider your schedule. So if you're like super busy in the week, Monday through Friday with work, then I'd probably go Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's not a big deal. If you want, you can go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, weekend. At that point, going, you can like really, you have a lot of flexibility. You can kind of accommodate to your schedule. So Any of those really is fine. Okay. Let's go to the next section of the training, and that's going to be all about training volume. Okay. So frequency is how often you're working out. Volume is how much you're working out per session, or how much volume you're doing per session. Okay. Again, beginner versus advanced, the more of a beginner you are, the less volume and frequency you need. Because again, the stimulus of weightlift, of resistance training is so new to your body, it can adapt and it can grow quite easily with little you only need a small stimulus to grow. That's why the more advanced you get, the harder that stimulus is to apply to actually continue growing, because your body's like so adapted to like so many variables of training, right? So with your training volume, beginner, I made this a big mistake when I was like just probably my first 3 years. I would do something called a bro split, and you guys are probably all this as well, which is like one muscle group per day. For example, chest Mondays, back Tuesdays, the vibe. Legs Wednesday, shoulders Thursday, arms Friday, something like that, right? And although this will definitely make gains, not ideal, because let's say Monday is chest day, you're doing so much volume for your chest. You're probably doing 7 to 8 exercises because that's the only muscle group you're doing, which is way overkill, right? Eventually, there becomes to a point where this is called garbage volume, where your muscles, that working muscle, is so broken down that anything above and beyond that will not yield anything else. So literally, whatever you're doing after that point is literally useless. That's why it's called garbage volume. So I would never suggest you do like even more than 4 exercises per muscle group per day, because that's a lot of volume, especially if you're doing it properly. Okay, you guys will be shocked. You don't actually need that much volume. I think that you'll start to see a trend in this training: quality over quantity. I promise you guys will get a much better results in your training if you just go hard for that 1 hour, 45 to 75 minutes. You put your phone on, do not disturb, right? That session's for you. You have your music in, you have your pre-workout, your water, whatever, and just focusing on the workout. Don't check emails, don't check social media. Put your phone on, do not disturb. Do not check your phone for that hour unless you're plugging in the app, and just focus on the session. Mind muscle connection, we'll talk about in a sec, is so important with this. So if you're doing that, you'll get way more out of your training than going crazy with the frequency and the volume. Okay. As you get more intermediate, as you get more advanced, then you can do more volume per muscle group. Okay, because obviously then your muscles can handle that, and it needs more of a stimulus, which is one of the variables of progressive overload, to then build more muscle. Okay, so with volume now, like let's say you're approaching the advanced phase, then I would say 4 to 5 max, absolute max, when it comes to exercises per muscle group per day. Okay, so for me, let's take me for example, I'm doing a variation of a push-pull leg split. And so on Mondays, it'll be like chest, shoulders, triceps. Now I'm doing biceps but let's say push day, chest, shoulders, triceps. I'll do like 3 to 4 chest, 2 to 3 shoulder, 1 to 2 triceps. That's kind of my breakdown in general for most of my workouts. Okay, beginner, you only need, let's say, 2. If you're doing, let's say you're doing a full body session, 2 max per body part per day. Okay. So that kind of answers that question here. How many exercises per muscle group? Again, beginner, I'd say 2. Advanced, max 4 to 5. Absolute max. Okay. Workout duration. If you are beginner, I would say 45 is awesome. You don't need to do crazy volume. You don't need to do crazy frequency. Go in, go out, focused, quality session. 45 minutes is really all you need, right? For me, I notice, even again, after 10 years of training, the mental aspect is as important as the physical, if not even more important than the physical part, because of the mind muscle connection. So for me, it's like very noticeable after the hour mark. My focus levels just like drop a lot, right? I'm no longer my mind muscle connection after the hour mark like kind of starts to dwindle quite a lot. And so will typically wrap up between 60 and 75 minutes. Like I track all my workouts, almost every single time it's between 60 and 75. And that's including the warm-up. So I'm in there again. I'm like high quality sessions, no distractions. I'm in and out, like no BS, right? So that is kind of my recommendation for a workout duration. I'd say between 40 and 75 minutes. If you're beginner, 45 is great. If you're advanced, max 75 minutes. Again, I used to be one of those guys that would work out 2 hours a day when I was a kid. So absolutely, I promise you, not needed. Okay, let's go to the next section. Any questions on that? Awesome. No more questions. Perfect. Cool. Next section is eccentric versus concentric, right? What does that mean? Basically, these are like the portions of the movements, right? So there's a little bit more of an advanced tech topic, but definitely very effective once you reach more like an intermediate advanced phase is optimizing these, because this can really play a massive role in overcoming plateaus, which is inevitable in your fitness journey, right? So eccentric versus concentric. Every single exercise that you do in the gym has both an eccentric and a concentric. So to visualize this, let's take bench press, for example. Okay. On the way down is the eccentric, right? So that's the lengthening of the muscle, right? You're lengthening the pecs. Then when you push up is the concentric. That's the shortening of the muscle. So eccentric is lengthening, concentric is shortening. Every single muscle that you work in the gym, every single exercise has both of these, right? For the back, it's going to be the reverse. You're doing a lat pull down. On the way down, concentric. You're going explosive, right? Then you want to control the negative. That's the eccentric. Okay? Every bicep. On the way up, concentric, you want to explode. And then you want to control the way down, eccentric. Okay? Super important. Because with eccentric, all three of those examples I just mentioned, so many people kind of just let gravity do the work. And this is, from what I've seen, actually most of the hypertrophic benefit you get from exercises happen in the eccentric portion, because you can actually overload that muscle more in the eccentric than you can in the concentric. Okay. When it comes to like what to actually do, like, okay, cool. Like how do I actually apply this to my training? Is on the concentric part. So that's the shortening of the muscle. So again, let's take the bench press, for example. At the bottom, you want to push up, concentric. Any exercise on the concentric portion, you want to be explosive. And this is where it gets more advanced, is when you kind of incorporate the breathing techniques. So on the concentric portion, you want to blow out. So you're at the bottom of the bench press, right? You want to kind of, because that will like make everything tighter, and you'll actually be significantly stronger with proper breathing techniques. Okay, so think of the concentric as explosive and the eccentric as controlled. Okay, and then use those breathing techniques accordingly. So on the concentric, breathe out. On the eccentric, breathe in. Right? Okay, so because that will help you kind of control the weight, and the concentric, you want to be as powerful as possible. That will activate the muscle fibers significantly more, and you'll be able to target more of the fibers in that working muscle, and ultimately move more weight and apply more stimulus to the working muscle. Okay, hopefully that made sense. I know it's a little bit more of an advanced technique, but again, as you become more intermediate, as you become more advanced, this is definitely what will take your training to the next level, for sure. Okay. What is more important for hypertrophy? So actually, like, which of these two phases is more important? I actually mentioned it. So a lot of people think it's the concentric, because that's like when you're explosive, but it's actually the eccentric. So you can overload more in the eccentric. So think about this, like on the bench press, on the way down, you can most likely, not everyone, but most likely you can do more weight if the movement was just controlling the negative. Like think about this for yourself right now. If you're doing bench press, do you think you can do more weight on the way down if the movement was just half of it? That's it. You stop here, that's it. Or on the way up. Like which one of those? I'm gonna actually answer in the chat box. I want to see which one of the, let's say the first movement is just going on the way down on bench press. The second movement is being explosive. Which one of those do you think you can do more weight on? Let's see what you guys say. Pop them down below. Let's see it, Tommy. Fatima, eccentric. Yeah, you got it. Amazing. So Fatima got it. Bonus points for her. Amazing. So she got it. Yeah. You can do more on the eccentric, so you can overload it more. So eccentric is actually more important for hypertrophy. This is why it is so important, especially on stuff like lat pull down. Don't just like let the weight fly back up or fly back on the bicep curl, go down, right? which a lot of people do because a lot of your gains are in that eccentric portion of the movement. Okay, so awesome for Fatima for getting that correct there. Let's move on to exercise selection. We're flying through this. Any questions so far, guys? Go awesome, ditto. So we're doing squats is going back up the exactly. So the explosive part of the movement on the squat, boom, going up is concentric, going down is eccentric. Bang on, Katie, you got it. Let's move on to exercise selection. Okay, what are the best exercises? What are the worst exercises? And how often should you change exercises? So I think it's more important to have this because again, many of you guys are already in the academy or already in the elite programs. So you already have the selection of what I think are the most effective exercises per muscle group. So I'm going to go more on like how often should you change these. So I think a big issue is, especially beginners, because they find it boring to do the same exercise every week, is they want to change the workout. They want to change the exercise selections like every single time they do that muscle, which is not ideal because how are you ever going to apply progressive overload if you're always changing the exercise that you're doing? Right. So my suggestion, and what I have most of you guys do, is do the same split for at least 1 month. I would say even a quarter. I kind of do per quarter. Like I'll reprogram every quarter and pick a whole new exercise selection for that quarter for each muscle group. And that way I can apply progressive overload for that exercise so I can actually progress over the weeks and over the months. At the minimum, what monthly, and I'd suggest ideally quarterly. Okay. Again, if you're changing every single workout, you're not gonna ever be able to apply progressive overload, which we'll talk about next, which is the primary fundamental driver of actually building muscle. Like these are the mechanisms of actually building muscle. Again, we'll touch on that in just a sec. Okay. So when it comes to best versus worst, again, anyone that's in this live stream right now, you guys are, I believe, all in the program. Tommy's been in the program for many years. You guys already have a good idea of what the best exercises are. The worst ones are like, I'm sure you guys have probably seen so many on like Instagram reels and stuff like that. So there are many good ones. I might even have like an extra PDF attached to this training with like just maybe the top 10 exercises per like muscle group to make it a little bit more clear as opposed to going individually per exercise in this training. Okay, so hopefully that answered that there with the exercise selection. I'm gonna move on to the mechanisms of building muscle. But before that, I just want to make sure any questions that you guys have right now. I think Katie has one. Oh, that was with the squats. Any other questions right now? I'm going to pause here for a sec, and we'll move on to the mechanisms of hypertrophy. Okay, so everything is clear. Awesome. Crystal clear for you guys. Perfect. So let's move on to the how to actually build muscle. Okay, the mechanisms of hypertrophy. By the way, I'm actually loving this training so far. This is awesome. Let's do progressive overload. Okay, so there's 5 variables. I'm sure Tommy could probably list these because I've had him do these extensively in the elite program. 5 variables of progressive overload. Okay, what even is progressive overload? Before we get into the actual variables, progressive overload, I think it's a famous quote. If you're always doing the same thing, how can you expect to grow? Or if I forgot the exact quote, but basically, if you're always doing the same workouts, the same exercise, the same weight, like how are you ever gonna grow from that? Okay, you have to somehow improve your training over the weeks. You have to somehow give your muscle, the working muscle, your body, a new stimulus, to actually grow consistently and overcome plateaus. So that is where progressive overload comes, because this is the mechanisms to actually apply a new stimulus or make it harder every week to then give your muscles a reason to build new tissue. Okay. So the most obvious one is weights, right? Let's say you're doing squat, let's say you just start with the bar and then you add 10, or let's say even 5. Then you add 5, and you add another 5, you add another 5, consistently, like over time. That's why I always, again, recommend doing an exercise, especially compounds, for at least a quarter. Because then over that quarter, you have enough time to actually apply a lot of these variables, right? So the most obvious one is weight. If you're adding more weights every week, that obviously is the most trackable source of progressive overload. Just by doing that, you will gain muscle. Okay. The second one is volume. Okay. Let's say you're doing 8 reps at 135 for squat. Now you can do 9. Next week, you maybe 2 weeks can go for 10. Right. That is obviously a massive variable for progressive overload. The more volume you can do over time, the more stimulus or the more tension that muscle can handle, which is an obvious sign that it is growing, it is getting stronger. Okay. The next one is frequency. And this kind of ties a little bit back into recovery. How fast is your muscle able to recover to then hit it again? Okay. Every time you work out a muscle with weights, with resistance training, it breaks down. And as you guys know, during the breakdown process and the recovery, that's when it grows. So when you break it down, it activates muscle protein synthesis. That's when you eat enough, especially with enough protein. And the more you're able to activate that process or break down the muscle, the more you're able to apply progressive overload in terms of frequency. Okay. So what is typically shown to be optimal for frequency, I think I mentioned this earlier, is 2 to maximum 3 times per week. I'd say 2 is like what you should target for most muscle groups, and then 3 for muscle groups that you particularly want to focus and develop on. Obviously, you can't do everything at the same time. So maybe once per quarter, you want one muscle you want to focus on, where you can do that muscle 3 times per week, but at the expense of something else. So for me right now, for example, I'm only doing legs once a week because my legs are like hyper responders. They grow the fast. I would say the probably my best body part. And now I'm doing shoulders and delts 3 times a week because I want to develop these a lot in here in the winter. Okay. So that's where the flexibility in your training comes in. That's why nobody's like training split's gonna be the exact same, because everyone has different bodies, everyone has different goals, everyone has different focuses. And so that's kind of in terms of frequency, you can kind of choose, again, pick 1 or 2 muscle groups that you want to focus on for a quarter, hit it 3 times a week, and you'll see a lot of growth just by doing that, even if the weight and the volume stays the exact same. Okay. Then the next one is a little bit harder to track, and that is the rest times between the sets. So how much rest you need to be able to do the second and third set with the exact same weight and the exact same volume. Okay. Let's say it takes you a full 3 minutes to recover between your squats. But then the next week, you can do it down to 245, and then 230, 220, 215, 210, right? Even if it's like some marginal differences, again, the more advanced you get, the smaller those differences will be. But again, as you guys know, as I'm sure some of you are athletes, even like 1% difference when it comes to your training makes all the difference, right? Obviously, it's a little bit harder to track, so I focus on the first 3 before doing that. And the final one is the hardest to track. That is your form, and basically going slower on the eccentric, which again is obviously the hardest to track. Okay. The better your form, typically this is the most important when you're moving up in weight. So let's say you're doing bench press. You're now going for a weight that you've never done before. Of course, your form is going to be a little bit sloppy. It's not going to be perfect because obviously your muscles are not adapted to that weight. So something's going to give, or something, there's going to be secondary muscles assisting more than otherwise would be. But as you do that weight more and more, then again, you're applying progressive overload with proper form. Then over time, your form will improve with that higher weights. Okay. So why kind of my philosophy when it comes to actually applying these, you don't need to do all 5, of course. Pick one variable at a time for each muscle group and just apply that for a month or 2 months. Okay. Only when you like plateau with that variable, then change it up. So for example, obviously you're not going to be able to increase the weight forever. Let's say you're doing bench press. At some point, that's like so much weight now, it starts to like hurt your joints, or it's unfeasible to do that much weight. Then again, that obviously that at that point will happen for every exercise. Then apply another variable of progressive overload, right? Maybe you want to go for your 9th rep instead of 8, always doing 8. Or maybe you want to start hitting that muscle group 3 times a week instead of twice, right? So there's 5 variables. I would focus on one at a time and only change the variable once you really plateaued on progressing on a weekly basis. Okay. This is the easiest to track the more of a beginner you are, because the differences between week to week will be significantly, I should say, not marginally, significantly better and bigger than the more advanced you get. For me, like I've been training for 12 years now, and these variables, it'll be like very marginal differences when I really focus and apply that to my training. Okay. Time under tension. So before I go into time under tension, I really want to make sure that everything was super clear there. Any questions on progressive overload, guys? Oh, amazing. Some questions came in here. Okay. Mel, I'm not feeling the burn recently from the workout I'm doing. What could be the problem? I like to lift as heavy as I can. I like the pain. So actually, I'm going to talk about that in a sec. The burn. Because you don't actually, this is like kind of a myth as well. You're like, this doesn't necessarily mean hypertrophy. So I'm gonna talk about that as a specific topic here in a sec. Good question there, Mel. If I use super heavy weight, then I won't have energy for my other workouts. Exactly. So that's also very true. That's typically why I suggest doing all of your compound movements at the beginning of your workout, right? The first 3 exercises of every single workout should be your big movements when you have the most energy and the most focus. Okay. Then your isolations, things like leg curl, leg extension, bicep curl, triceps, lateral raises, rear delts, all these abs, all these smaller muscle groups, they don't need nearly as much time to recover. Right. And the breakdown of muscle is significantly less than on the compounds. That you should always do compounds first, isolations last, always. Okay. If you're unable to do that exercise at that time in the gym because it's busy, then swap for another exercise of that category. So for example, let's say all the bench press machines are used up. You cannot do bench press right off the bat. Then do shoulder OHP or whatever is the next compound movement in your program. Okay. So great question there, Fatima. That's actually very, very important to note. Is obviously you want to preserve the biggest movements in your workout are always going to be first, and you obviously want to do that at the beginning when you have the most energy and the most focus. Amazing question. Tommy, I always shoot for a burn on the last. I'm going to talk about that in a second with the burn. I feel incomplete with the burn. Yes. Should I aim to increase my weights with each set and maintain the same amount of reps? Yes. So that's a great example of progressive overload. Gawain, by the way, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Is increasing the weights even though the reps and everything else is the same. That's you kind of almost want to keep everything at a base, all the other variables the same, because then you can really track that one variable that you are manipulating. Kind of like a scientific experiment. You want to have controlled variables and then one thing that you're actually looking to alter to see how it affects your training or the result, right? Great question there, guys. Many of these are about the burn. I'm gonna come back to that in a sec. Amazing pronunciation. Awesome. Cool. So next I'm gonna talk about great questions, guys, by the way. Time under tension. So this is like the next most important when it comes to actually building muscle. And this is more of an intermediate thing because really like these things alone, if you're a beginner, is more than enough stimulus to build significant amount of new tissue. Okay. This is a little bit more, I'd say intermediate stage to really start focusing on this is time under tension. And this goes back to like form, time under tension times proper form. Because what time under tension means is how much tension you're placing on the working muscle, right? You don't want to speed through the exercise. You want to really control every single rep and every single exercise and every single set, because the more tension you can place on that muscle, the more it's going to grow. It has to, because now you're applying so much of a stimulus, that muscle has to adapt that stimulus. Okay. So where this comes in with proper form, where this really matters is kind of isolating the muscle. Is obviously if your form sucks, then you're not able to isolate the muscle. Therefore, you're not able to even barely apply proper tension or optimize tension to that working muscle. Okay. So the most common example I see of this in the gym is with bench press. So many guys they kind of ego lift and they do way more weight than is actually optimal for them. And when they do that, they overuse their delts and their triceps as secondary muscles. That's why I think most guys are such an underdeveloped chest, because they're overusing their delts and their triceps, because the weight that they're doing is way more than that their pecs alone can handle. Okay, so take the ego out of it, right? And with Tommy, I know Tommy can attest because I've hammered this with Tommy with proper form, is this will make a bigger difference than even arguably applying a lot of these progressive overload variables. Okay, this is the most important. Nothing else here really matters until the form is good. Because if the form sucks, then again, the tension is not even on the working muscle, and then everything else kind of breaks down from there. And you also the risk of injury is significantly higher if your form is all over the place. So this is king. Make sure your form is right. Then you can apply all these other things that I'm talking about here. Okay. So once the form is right, then you're able to isolate the muscle that you want to be working. For example, bench press, ideally you want to be targeting mostly the pecs, right? And then you can apply as much tension on the pecs as you possibly can handle. Then over time, you'll be able to handle more, and that's where growth happens. Okay, hopefully that is as clear as possible. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is ROM, which stands for range of motion, right? Stretch versus squeeze. So of course, you want to get as big of a range of motion as possible, but not so big where you lose tension on the working muscle. So this is a little bit hard to explain. So I'm going to try my best to explain this in like the easiest way possible. Let's pick an example for lateral raises. I think this is probably the easiest to visualize. Okay, when you're doing lateral raises, right, full range of motion would be like here and then all the way to like basically parallel. Okay, in this case, you don't want to have that big of a range of motion because the tension, so here is the tension is maxed out here, right? And then if you go all the way down, if you hold the weights right, like literally touching your legs or your side, you lose, there's no tension on the side delt. So you actually want to stop like right here. And I have this obviously in the form pointers. But why this is important is because range of motion is important to get the full dynamic, or basically the bigger the range of motion, the more muscle fibers you're able to target in that working muscle. Okay. So this should be pretty clear with all the exercises that I have for you guys listed out, obviously with the form pointers and the videos, but you want to get as big of a range of motion under tension as possible. Okay, this will activate as much muscle fibers in that muscle as possible, which obviously yields significantly more hypertrophy. Okay, where it comes to stretching or squeezing, that's kind of the point I wanted to make earlier, is for almost every single exercise, you want to think about kind of like the concentric and eccentric, that there's two parts of the exercise, right? The stretch and the squeeze. So let's take tricep extension as an example. You want to think about stretching and squeezing for all isolations. Okay? Isolation exercises are any exercise that requires one muscle group. You're working on one muscle group. This is much harder to apply because it's more of a mind-muscle connection thing. With compounds, things like squat, bench press, lat pull down, rows, stuff like that, because there's way more than one muscle group at play. So obviously it's harder to focus on all your muscles in your legs when you're doing a squat, as opposed to doing a leg extension, which is just the quads. Okay, so with the stretch versus squeeze, let's do tricep. We'll do one for the upper body, one for the lower body. Tricep extensions. So at the bottom of the movement, you're going down. You want to squeeze your triceps, your flex. So squeeze/flex at the bottom of the movement, and then your triceps here will be stretched at the top of the movement. Right, so you go boom, squeeze, stretch, and that's for every single exercise. Same with leg extension. You bring the weights up, you squeeze your quads and flex your quads as hard as you can for a second hold at the top, and then at the stretch position, and then at the very bottom, you got a nice deep stretch in that position. Okay. If you're able to get a stretch and a squeeze for all exercise, like that's the full range of motion, and then you're able to target as much muscle fibers as possible, right? And that will obviously yield, again, much more gains in the long run because you're then activating a significantly larger portion of muscle fibers in that working muscle. Okay. Hopefully that made sense. Mind muscle connection. Last thing before we get any questions here. So anything that you guys have questions on in this topic, drop them down in the chat right now, and we'll go over this in a sec. Mind muscle connection. What does that mean? So this kind of goes back to the range of this kind of stretching or squeezing. If you're able to flex and squeeze the working muscle, then you have mind muscle connection, right? So typically this fades, like for me, it's pretty drastic after the hour mark. It's just way harder for me to like really think about activating and stretching and squeezing, flexing that muscle for every single rep in that set. Okay. So if you're able, don't just mindlessly go through the movements. You probably see, you guys have all seen people at the gym, they're on their phones, they're doing like a machine. They're like just doing the exercise, but they're not even actually thinking or engaging with that machine or that exercise. That's like garbage. Don't do that, please. Mind muscle connection. This is where you actively think about what you're doing. And if you have a strong mind muscle connection, you're actually able to activate significantly more muscle fibers in that working muscle. Which again, the last point is very important because again, the more muscle fiber you're able to work, the bigger bang for your buck you're gonna get, and the more results, the more muscle you're gonna build as a result. Okay, so any questions on this topic, guys? Drop them down below. I know it's a little bit complex there, but anything that you want to ask there, drop them down below. Or is that pretty clear? Hopefully, I made that as clear as possible. Okay, so it looks like that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna try to wrap this up because we're already at almost the hour mark. So I'm kind of rambling here. Next thing is avoiding injury. So with injury, the biggest tip I can think of right now, or the most important, I should say, is the best way to avoid injury is doing these things, right? Have a proper warm up. Always at the beginning of your workout, spend 5, 6, 7 minutes on a treadmill, on a bike, on a stair, whatever choice of cardio you want to do. Spend 5 to 10 minutes on it, and then during this time, this is where you get mentally locked in as well. A lot of people say they struggle with motivation. I'm gonna put this in the same category, motivation, as right here. A lot of people say they struggle with motivation because they're not mentally in it, right? This is the time to get mentally checked in, is during the warm-up, right? During the warm-up, spend 5, 6, 7 minutes on a cardio equipment of your choice. Get your favorite music in, right? Get your pre-workout, your water, and just visualize what you're about to do. No emails, no social media. Literally put your phone on do not disturb. This is like the biggest game changer I've seen in myself as well. And that focus, that hour of the gym, or that next hour is on you. It's focused on yourself. Okay? Because this will make a probably bigger difference than anything else here in this topic will. Okay? Warm up. And then I in most of you guys' programs, I have a dynamic warm up as well, which is like supplemental to whatever muscle group you're working. And that's just kind of to avoid injury. When it comes to the most common ones are typically rotator cuff, right? Hips and lower back stuff is typically the most common injuries I've seen. So the dynamic warm-ups are really important to warm up and get blood flow into those joints to then avoid injury on bench press, OHP, stuff like that. Okay. Next, obviously, is proper form. The better the form, the less likely it is for you to get injured. That's just obvious, right? You want to avoid 1 rep maxes unless you're a power lifter, which I don't think any of you guys are. 1 rep maxes are in terms of hypertrophy and fat loss and anything else you guys have goals for is useless. You do not need to do 1 rep maxes. The only reason people do 1 rep maxes for ego and for powerlifting. Okay. No one here should be doing 1 rep maxes. That's the easiest way to get injured. I promise you. And then that kind of ties into the motivation there. Okay. Next thing, I'm gonna whiz through this here, guys. Build muscle and lose fat at the same time. Is it possible? I think Mel had this question. The only times, there's 3 scenarios where this is possible. Number 1, you're brand new to training. You have less than 1 year of experience in the gym. absolutely, if you're overweight, it is definitely, oh, we got Josh coming in an hour late. It is definitely possible to build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. Situation number two is if you're on steroids, right? When you're on steroids, a lot of these things I'm talking about in this training are kind of out of the window because they don't really apply to you, because obviously that gives you such a big advantage. So stay natural. I highly recommend. And three is if you're coming off a long-term injury, or you just stopped working out for like a couple of years, maybe you got busy with work or career or whatever, then at that time as well, because again, your body's not used to that stimulus, it is quite easy to build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. If you are intermediate or advanced, then no. I would strongly advise to focus on one goal at a time, because you'll get more results by focusing and going hard on one goal as opposed to just trying to do everything at the same time. My last thing I want to say on this topic is building muscle and losing body fat when it comes to nutrition are on the opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of calories. For building muscle, getting strong, you have to be in a slight calorie surplus. You have to be giving your body excess resources to then be able to build new tissue, right? And obviously with fat loss, it's the exact opposite. You have to be in a calorie deficit, otherwise you will not lose weight, period. So because they're on the polar opposite side of the spectrum, that's why at the more advanced you get, even like at the intermediate phase, I'd highly recommend focusing on one of those at a time, because I promise you'll get significantly better results by focusing on one goal at a time as opposed to trying to do everything at the same time. Okay. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go through these three things here right now, and then go over a Q&A at the end. So any questions, drop them down below. I have a bookmarked right here. Anything I missed, I'm gonna go over at the end, because we're already approaching the hour mark, and I want to respect you guys' times. The next thing we're gonna talk about quickly is rest time, rest days. So this kind of ties back into training frequency. The more advanced you are, right, the less rest days you need. Right? If you're brand new, it takes you a lot longer to recover from each session. And so you might need two rest days between each session, because you're so fatigued and you're so sore. And as you know, when you're starting off a new training program, typically is when you're the most sore. Once you're over that hump, it's actually quite hard to get consistently sore. For me, like if I'm sore, I'm actually pretty happy, because it doesn't happen that much because I'm training so much, right? So the more advanced, the less rest you need. With the burn, so Mel had this question. The burn sensation doesn't necessarily mean you're gaining muscle and getting stronger. What the burn means, it more so refers to the pump, right? That's just obviously building a lot of lactic acid in the muscle and getting a ton of blood flow in the muscle. So the burn can be amazing for maximizing pump, which is a variable of hypertrophy, but it's not like it's not directly correlated with results. Basically, just because you sweat, for example, does not mean you're going to be losing body fat, right? Just because you have a burn doesn't mean you're going to be gaining muscle. Okay, that's kind of like a strong correlation for sure, but it's not like a cause. It's not a causation. Okay, so with the burn, again, it's awesome if you have that, but it's not like fundamental to, it's not needed, I should say, in order to build new tissue. Okay, the burn is great. There's nothing wrong with it. And obviously it will get you an amazing pump, but again, it's not essential. It's not like the pillar of hypertrophy. Okay. Then quickly, guys, I'm going to end off with the myths. Okay. So I already addressed higher up low weight toning garbage. I think I'm not going to go too much into this. Just basically, when you're in a fat loss phase, there's not much that needs to be changed training wise, as opposed to when you were in hypertrophy phase. Okay. Bro splits, I talked about this as well. It's definitely not, it's a good if you're a beginner, because you definitely get results, but it's not ideal. So don't be doing one muscle group per day. There's much better splits that you can do, as we discussed earlier in the call. Pump, as I mentioned here, does not equal hypertrophy. This kind of refers to burn as well. So I'm going to do pump / burn. Does not equal hypertrophy, right? Because the hypertrophy, these are not the direct causation of hypertrophy. These are almost like a byproduct of it. Okay. Turning fat into muscle, that is a myth, because they're completely different, like cells. Muscle fibers versus like fat adipose tissue, they're completely different cells. So adipose tissue doesn't just magically turn into lean tissue, right? You have to, the only way, they're completely different mechanisms, right? You have to burn adipose tissue by being in a fat calorie deficit to get rid of it. And you want to build lean tissue muscle fibers by applying progressive overload and obviously eating properly and sleeping, all the things, right? You don't just turn fat into muscle. That's not how it works. They're not even the same cells, right? Adipose tissue versus muscle fibers, completely different. Okay. So you can't just do that. If you are overweight, I recommend losing body weight fat first because your body will be much more efficient when it's leaner, then focusing on hypertrophy, building muscle, and getting stronger. Okay. This one's for the women. Okay, we got a couple women on here. Mel, Fatima. Lifting makes you bulky. It absolutely does not make you bulky. Okay. Here's the only thing I'm going to say on this. Men have approximately 20x the amount of testosterone as women do. Most men already struggle building muscle. Just how much harder it is for women to build muscle is like 20x. Okay. The only women you see getting bulky off lifting are like are the women, and you'd be surprised. The women doing steroids, which is more than you think, or obviously professional bodybuilders, stuff like that. Okay. You women should be lifting heavy because that is the best way to get that toned look that you're looking for. Not the high rep, low weight toning garbage. I promise you, lifting heavy is will give you a toned look. Okay. It will not make you bulky. It's so much harder as a woman to build muscle than it is for men. Men already on average struggle. It's hard. Building muscle is not easy to build muscle. Okay. So I promise you this one of the biggest myths. It's almost like there's an analogy for it, right? It's like the first time you drive a car, you're gonna be like a NASCAR driver or for a Formula One driver. Just because you drive a car doesn't mean you're gonna be a Formula One driver, right? It's kind of like the same analogy there. Just because you lift heavy will not make you bulky. I promise you. Okay, I've worked with hundreds of women in person and online. This is not the case at all, and this is actually the best way to get that tone look that every woman wants. Okay. Without further ado, that is the training, guys. I know it was a little bit longer than I expected, over an hour there, but I think I went in depth, and that's what I kind of want to do because this training will be available long into the future, so you can easily reference this. Now it's time for Q&A. Any questions you guys want answered live on this call, you can either pop them in the chat below or turn your cameras on, and I can ask you one-on-one here on the call as well. Okay. Let's go with and by the way, huge shout out for everyone that stayed for the full hours. Almost 10 of you guys on right now that stayed the entire hour. So massive shout out to you guys. That is freaking awesome. Okay. So I'm gonna stop the share here. Boom. Let's go over some questions. Whoops. Okay. So maximize this video. Whoops. Okay, so we have a bunch of new questions that came in. Let me go back and scroll until I'm making sure we're getting all of them answered. Mel says our program ends with 30 minutes of cardio. So you can start the cardio and pause it, then go back to it. Yeah, so Mel, the cardio portion is obviously if your goal is fat loss, right? That is kind of one of the tools for fat loss. I don't want to get too much into that. I want to keep this training as much on building muscle and the working out portion. We'll do a full fat loss masterclass on another training. Okay. But the cardio portion is a tool that you can use in order to get in a calorie deficit, which is what's needed to lose body fat. The calories for building muscle is a lot. Actually, you'd be surprised. You don't need that much more calories on top of your maintenance to build new tissue, right? So I think a lot of people have this. I mean, me as well. One of the biggest myths ever is I used to think the more I ate, the more muscle I'd be able to build. Right? How silly is that? Absolutely not the case at all, right? You only need a couple hundred calories over your maintenance to give your body enough resources to build new tissue. Okay. So for me, I mean, I'm quite high. My example is quite extreme. Let's take the average person. Let's say Tommy is eating 2,500 calories per day to maintain where he's at. If I want him to get in a lean bulk phase and to build new tissue and get stronger, I put him at 26, 27, max 28. And then focus on the progressive overload factors, which is really what's going to build that muscle. You don't need that much more calories and protein on top of your maintenance to give your body enough resources to build new tissue. Okay. Let's see. I find I've lost muscle and fat. Is that normal? I feel I am looking leaner but losing muscle. So a lot of going, if your goal is fat loss, a lot of times because you're in a calorie deficit, you're most likely eating less carbohydrates than prior, and a large portion of your muscle fibers hold glycogen from carbohydrates and water. Okay. 1 gram of carbohydrates yields or holds on to 3 grams of water. So you can imagine if you cut your carb intake from 200 to 100, then you're going to be losing a lot of glycogen in the muscle and water as well as 3 times as much water, which may seem like you're losing muscle, but you're not actually losing muscle. The muscle is flatter. Okay. The moment you go back to maintenance, that muscle will be replenished with glycogen and it'll look the exact same. I promise you, probably even bigger because you have less body fat covering it than prior. Okay, so that's kind of like an illusion. You're not losing muscle. It's actually quite hard to lose a muscle if you are consistently training. Josh came in late. I just saw that. Charlie, unfortunately, I missed most of the call where we'll be able to find the recording. So I'm gonna have a section here, guys. Let me share my screen one more time so I can make this crystal clear. I'm gonna make a new section like tonight. Let me know if I can see that. Tonight, so if we go on school, where we're gonna have like in-depth trainings like this one for replays. So if you go here into the classroom tab, I'm gonna have a new section tonight. It'll be probably down here somewhere. That'll be one for replays for Q&As and one for replays for in-depth trainings, aka this one. Okay, so obviously we have this recorded, so this will be uploaded by tonight, so it should be available for you guys tomorrow in the classroom section, and you'll see clearly marked replays for Q&As, replays for trainings. Okay, so that'll be available for you to watch. Josh, probably one of the best trainings we've had in a while, so you definitely want to catch up on that one. Thank you. The session was very informative. Fatima, thanks for joining. It was awesome having you guys. Can I know, Mel, can I know why some people they build muscle but tummy gets bigger? So Mel, you want to give me some more context around that? Typically, if they're going like a dirty bulk or like extreme bulk, then of course they just get so inflamed and hold on to way more water and carbs as a result. Or if people are taking steroids, like a huge amount, then you get these steroid guts, which is very unattractive. Probably say like that's extreme. That's like in the bodybuilder realm. But for the average person, if their tummy gets bigger, that's because they're going way too much calorie surplus on top of what they need to actually build muscle. Okay. Josh got it. Mel got it. Okay. Any last minute questions, guys? Otherwise, I'm going to end it here. I know it's been over an hour, so I want to respect everyone's time. Huge shout out for all you guys for staying this long. It's actually pretty impressive. And I'll obviously have the replay available for you guys in the classroom section of this call. So last chance, guys. Josh, you missed it, but basically, if you screenshot at any time, even like now is your last chance, basically. This week's challenge, this is the live stream right now, and post on your Instagram story with the hashtag MeisterBody. Obviously, tag myself. Then you get entered, randomly entered to win $100 gift card. Okay, so I'll be announcing that on Sunday. Anyone that posts the take a screenshot of this weekly challenge of this live stream right now, post it on their story, tags me with the hashtag MeisterBody. I will be picking one of you guys to win $100 gift card. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of the training. Any other questions you guys have? It looks like that is all of them. But again, thank you. Massive shout out to everyone that came on the training today. I'm going to have this available on the replay in the classroom section of the community. And then the next training I have for you guys will be on, let's check the calendar, will be a Q&A in 2 weeks. So I'm basically going to make this every 2 weeks now. So I'm going to flip-flop between a training like this and then a Q&A where you guys can ask me one-on-one any struggles, any questions that you guys have since the last Q&A session that we did. So that's going to be every single month. Okay. Besides that, guys, any last minute questions there? Katie, so much awesome information. Thank you for doing this. Look forward to the fat loss one. Katie, you legend. Appreciate your commitment and dedication, especially in the community. I love seeing your posts, Katie. Absolutely smashing it there. Me too. Very informative. Thank you, Mel. Amazing. Awesome, guys. I'm going to end it here. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been awesome. Probably one of the best trainings I've done in a long time. So I definitely want to do these every single month going forward. Okay. Have a fantastic rest of your Thursday, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Smash your fitness goals. I'd love to see you guys' updates and progress in the community. And I'll catch you guys here on the next call in 2 weeks' time, Q&A style, next Thursday, November 21st.